join us. So, I don't know, do we need to do a full round robin attendance check-in, or can folks do that in the chat? It looks like Diana kind of already checked attendance. I think
you're okay.
Okay, good. So I think we'll just jump to jurisdictional updates. So Mayor Venice, do you want to kick us off with that from City of Eugene?
Oh yeah, I should have really sort of thought about this. I guess the big piece is that the city, the council just had a public hearing about extending the timeline for the safe sleep sites. They were set to expire in 2023, and we are expecting to extend that to 2024 because we actually have funding that takes us that far, and they have been very successful, and they have wait lists, and that has turned out to be a very successful model of enabling people to stabilize. So I suppose that's the sort of big news, is that we'll extend that. The other sites are in, and probably Dan can speak to the Square One site. Other sites are moving forward, and we're a little bit, we're kind of tied in knots over here in the city of Eugene. We've got these World Athletic Championships, and that's taking up a huge amount of work. And then we also have, council has a very busy schedule, so there's a lot going on. But I think the safe sleep site is probably the biggest update right now.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor Van Gordon?
We're actually on recess right now, so I don't have much of an update. I believe the home RFPs out there, so I think that's going to be something interesting when it gets into the fall. But a lot of work's been going into this World Track and Field Championship, so it's been fun so far.
Excellent. Councillor Fleck?
Oh, thank you. So we had a work session Monday night in Cottage Grove about possible future low barrier shelters. And Carrie Forward was one of the presenters, and that was awesome. We're still kind of fighting with some NIMBY type issues, but I'm seeing some progress there. We have a second reading for next Monday. We have a second reading for an ordinance that will allow a homeowner to have one unhoused person stay on their property with restrictions, and or a nonprofit church can have up to two. This is a new process that we're going to try as a filler stopgap, help us with capacity because we're a small city. I'm excited. For my little agency, we're going to ask to have a couple of folks be able to stay here, and we're just going to keep plugging and moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner Farr, did you have anything from the county side that you wanted to?
I'll say a couple of things, but Kate Budd really covers just about everything from the county side. I will say that this morning at the Mental Health Summit, Kate was astounding in talking to about 35 professionals, psychiatrists, judges, one elected official, me, and people from public safety. And Kate, what you did this morning was pretty amazing. The presentation that you made and the data that was provided seemed to me a checklist of the things we've always been wanting to put in one document. So well done, Kate. The other thing I'll mention is we're preparing to soon get work started on our Cottage Grove Community Federally Qualified Health Center. Mike, you're aware of that. That's in progress and actually moving along swiftly. We're working on the navigation center. We're hoping, as Kate said this morning, and in the meeting later on, we'll be opening that hopefully in August. We're continue to work on the crisis stabilization center. Still shooting for 2025 on that, but a lot of progress on that. Other than that, there's so much going on that the mayor touched on some of the most important stuff that's happening inside of the city of Eugene, and Mayor Van Gordon touched on the things that are happening inside of Springfield. So really, I'm as much of a listening for instructions as much as telling about what we're doing.
Excellent. I was just texting Chris to see if he was jumping on, if there was any pieces that he wanted us to wait for him on. Any other jurisdictional updates? Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the consent agenda. So we have the minutes from the May 19th meeting, as well as the financial dashboard and financials that Kate prepared. Yeah, Commissioner Farr. Sorry, did you have your hand up, Commissioner Farr?
Oh, I'm sorry, I said it. I'd like to move the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I wasn't there, but I'm happy for the meeting, but I'm happy to offer a second.
I think I just saw Mayor Van Gorden's hand.
Perfect.
Right. Is there any discussion, questions that you guys have about any of the financial items?
I just wanted to say one thing, if I could just jump in, which is my appreciation for this financial statement, which I now can understand, and so I'm so grateful to you for that. And I did have one question about in the revenue and expenses chart. Yeah, this one, the COVID rent relief cares. The revenues have exceeded the expenditures, and I'm assuming that that money will be dispersed, or there was just a time lag, or?
Yes, great question. Thank you for the feedback, and thanks for the question. Basically, it's that there were dollars received in the last fiscal year that paid for costs accrued in 2 fiscal years ago, which is where the increase over the 100% comes in. So great question. There, with the COVID rent release, there's just a lot of dollars moving through, and so we weren't able to account for it all in the current fiscal year that it was spent.
And that 20% that is still unexpended will be expended beginning this new fiscal year?
Correct. And I will say that the information on this dashboard was just through data I received through June 6th.
Oh, okay.
And so I do feel like there's an opportunity once the county closes their 2021-22 fiscal year that I can do an update on this dashboard so that we have a complete picture of what happened within the last fiscal year. It would be of interest to me, and I imagine it would be of interest to all of you. So I believe many of those gaps that you're seeing between the expenses and the revenue will shrink considerably.
Yeah, it's a little alarming how you spent a lot more than you have, apparently. So in almost all categories. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, and one of the reasons is the vast majority of our contracts are cost reimbursement. And so we do have to spend, ahead of the reimbursement, which is, something also to keep in mind when agencies are sharing the difficulties they've had due to COVID. With such significant increases in dollars, agencies are having to expend dollars at a much higher rate and wait for reimbursement on the other end. And that can certainly be challenging, especially for a smaller nonprofit who doesn't have a significant savings in the bank.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions about the minutes or the financials? Okay, well, if no more, then we'll vote. Those in favor of passing?
Aye.
Aye. Thumbs up. Wave. Any opposed? Okay, passes with consent unanimously. Excellent. I just found my agenda so I can try to track here on my own as well. Okay, so the next thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about was the draft strategic plan. If you guys remember back and reading back through the minutes, you can see that last executive committee, there were some questions brought up, and wanting to send it back to the committees really to analyze, can we actually get this all done in the next year? This strategic plan was really supposed to be focused on the next year. Just some reminding folks of context, there was an ad hoc committee that met of the PHB to talk about what a longer strategic plan might look like, and that committee really decided that it was more prudent for us to get a year plan in place, so then we could really figure out what it might look like for a longer term strategic plan for the community. And there's a lot of moving pieces for how that might come about. So the 1 year strategic plan was the task of the subcommittees to try to identify what they were going to be doing for the next year. So there was a little bit of concern from the last executive committee meeting that some of these things might be a little ambitious for a 1 year strategic plan, and so those were sent back to the subcommittees. And Kate, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, well said, Brittany. Thanks for the context. So after the last executive PHB committee meeting, I had sent an email to the staff, and in some cases the chairs of the subcommittees, sharing the opportunity for the subcommittees to look at their outcomes through the lens that the executive committee had suggested. So is it realistic? Does the money, exist, or, are there opportunities to bring in the money? Is it indeed something that this committee could do in the next year? And the vast majority of feedback that I received from the committees is, yep, we think that we've proposed things that we are wanting to work on that are realistic and that we'll be able to move forward. There were some adjustments, and so there are changes in this document from the last document that you viewed, but not significant changes. Many of them are the same. And certainly appreciate the committees taking a second look and thinking through what it is that they want to work on, and do recognize that sometimes ambitious goals are motivating and do provide a bigger picture for a committee to work toward. And so I wanted to bring this forward to this group for consideration of this plan to move it forward to the full PHB committee to vote on. I will share, it's not the most comprehensive plan that you may have seen. It very much just rolls up the work of our current committees. But we also recognize that we have work to do on the broader level within both the executive committee and the PHB committee to help plan for future years. And so, at least in my mind, it didn't make sense for this year to have a highly comprehensive plan. Instead, it was just an opportunity to write down collectively what are our committees working toward, and to track how their progress is moving forward. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or concerns about what our committees are sharing that they're going to be working on.
Yeah. Okay, so I have Mayor Venice, Mayor Van Gordon, and then Commissioner Farr.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, and I think I've missed 2 meetings. So I think I know I missed the last PHB meeting, and in the minute, although I read the minutes, and I think I missed the shelter stakeholder meeting when this was done. So I'm fine with this. I just, I think the goals are good. It's never, I always stumble here a little bit about whether we're advisory or whether we're an action-based committee. And so I'm just wondering what this group thinks about whether we need, even in this 1 year, to sort of anticipate the larger planning that we're going to do in the 3-year plan by at least setting up the structure that identifies the actions that we plan to take, and the metrics that we plan to use and the timelines for each of these things, even instead of just having a generic notes on progress, that we maybe could be specific, and then the individual committees, when they meet, could actually kind of begin to fill that out. Like, what are the actions they plan to take, so that at least we're beginning to sort of set that as a model for our planning in the longer term.
Thanks, Mayor Venice. I'll put myself in the queue because I have feedback.
Yeah, and I appreciate that point. One thing that I struggle with is, do we spend a great deal of time today moving forward, kind of creating this plan that will end now in 11 months? Or do we move this kind of more macro level plan forward and then create a template that could include, what are the more finite actions, metrics and timeline that our committees are utilizing, that they could kind of report out with for the rest of this year as practice, particularly because they're, each committee is so different. This type of specificity may come more naturally for one committee versus another.
Chair, do you mind if I just jump in and a quick response? So my thinking, Kate, is not that we would spend a lot of time fine tuning this document at all, but this is a bridge to the next work that we're going to do. And if we at least identify in this document, whether it's all filled out or not, but we identify that as we go into the next planning phase, we are going to look at assigning specific actions, establishing our metrics, and creating a timeline so that it's clear in those subcommittees, are we equipped to do that work? Have we set something up that we're actually equipped to do? How does this influence what we might put in a longer term plan? So I'm not suggesting we spend the next couple of months trying to figure out a one-year plan, but laying out what the potential categories are might help refine our process at the committee level. Oh yeah, so what actions are we after? Who's actually going to do that? That's my only point. Just create the template so we can fill it in as we go along.
Sounds good. We can definitely do that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you. Excuse me. When we talked about this before, and maybe I missed it, we talked about having a task specifically for the executive committee to work on the governance structure. Is that in here someplace?
That was actually going to be my question and comment as well, is that was one thing that came out of last meeting that didn't get put in this. And I would, sorry, I'm jumping in because it related to Mayor Venice's as well. I guess my recommendation is perhaps we add a section that with a goal of sort of organizing our executive governance or whatever we decide that ultimate goal is, with some tasks under it, that maybe that first task is to take this strategic plan, and to Mayor Venice's point, add the metrics and accountability components and then start tracking that as we go. So it almost becomes a task of the executive, or of the plan, that we just implement first. So instead of having to wait to do that before we approve it, let's put it in the plan as the first action item that we want the executive committee to do with this plan, if that makes sense. But then I'm also with Mayor Van Gordon. The coming up with that strategic 3-year plan was going to be a huge piece of the work this year, and I think it should probably be included in this plan if that's the case.
Yeah, and I'm supportive of what both Lucy and Brittany are describing. I'm a little bit dismayed that I feel like we've talked about this a couple of times when we've seen this before, but it's not reflected in the current documentation, and I hope you guys take a look at that. Because one of the things when I look at these, like, all the tasks are fine. This is going to get us through the next year. So I'm not but like, we're in this point where as a board, we're sort of having a shifting conversation about how do we do the next level of this type of work. And, just simply getting that material and having those conversations reflected in the work product would be helpful. So I would, before we move this on to the broader committee, we've got to put something around the bigger issues to describe for this board. And then I'm going to point out a couple of individual tasks that right? Like if you look at, let's see, like 7.1D, it's add to outreach staff who are following up with people in the community after discharge for healthcare. And like this is a theme through some of these tasks that I see. So, where we continue to grow the county footprint sort of left to right a little bit and just continue to sort of add services instead of leveraging partnerships that already exist. I've never seen the Pacific Source or Trillium contract, but I would almost guarantee you that is a responsibility that exists in, discharge care is a responsibility that exists for them already. So like I'm reading some of this stuff and going, okay, well, why would we spend time and energy doing an activity, right, that may just be simply relying on the partners that we have? And there's another one in here about ride source and on-demand ride for safe sleep sites. Again, I kind of coming back to the question that's going, okay, when we think about limited time, limited resources, this list is too long, right? Like how do we sort of whittle down some of these things that that are actually sort of maybe holding the group back? Because RideSource is a huge program. LTD does a great job providing it, right? We should leverage the program that exists instead of sort of creating and building new services that just, increase the infrastructure that the Health and Human Service system maintains right now. And I'll just kind of make one other sort of observation, and this is what I'm thinking about from the strategic plan, is like what we've done to get us to this point has been a lot of great work. What we've got to do to get us to the next level is going to be fundamentally different in breaking the version that, of work that we've, and the partnership that we've had. And I think a lot of people on this call have hinted at that, and I've heard both Brittany and Pat and Lucy talk about that pretty extensively. But like, we just have to do and start pulling that into the work, because when I read the document, it still feels like we're going to fundamentally do what we always did. And then we're going to, those sort of moving average problems, just import the task we did last time. And really what I would love to see is thin this list down, because half this stuff's going to get done, right? And then like pull back and have the conversation that Brittany and Lucy are sort of talking about how do we set the framework up to build on that next level to actually make it more tangible and make us better stewards for the resources that are currently pouring into this community. But it's a good start. This stuff takes iteration. So please don't take my little bit of frustration as being like where we're at. It's more, we've got to turn that corner and start making fundamental changes to how this type of work's done.
I appreciate your points, Mayor Van Gordon, and talking about just that doing things differently. One opportunity that I know we'll continue to talk about is that this plan is kind of bottom up from our committees. They're sharing what they're working on and then presenting it to us. And I think our future, and many of us are coalescing around this, is that instead there's a broader based plan, and then our committees are built around how do we progress that plan, which will help with some of these kind of more specific, onesie twosie type actions that may not necessarily, be the best use of a committee's time, or may not be as aligned with the overall plan as we might like it to be. So I do see that as a fundamental change that we'll continue to talk about.
Yeah, but I'm going to just push on that one a little bit hard, because I know you guys got a lot going on, right? Is we do need to have, like, these are people who are volunteering for our committees who are passionate about the subject, but may not know this broad, complex system. And I think it's the responsibility of staff, or even to engage with the elected officials, to help people maybe understand, like, hey, we haven't solved for that problem yet, so let's not spend a lot of energy on it. Let's figure out how to incorporate that. So like just having more communication around that would be helpful. I'm more than happy to meet with people and just say, hey, look, LTD's got this one, right? We can help make those connections. But like having, just having that conversation, I think matters. The other piece is, like, this isn't going to be 0 to perfect in one step, right? Like what I'm looking at in the piece that, that I'm watching for is, where do I actually see the fundamental changes based on the conversations that we're having around the table? right? Because it should look a little bit messy in how it goes forward, right? So when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at it from a perspective of, hey, we've had like 2 or 3 conversations where these same things pull through, and they're not getting incorporated into the actual work product, right? So, to me, and maybe that's shifting in, in mentality and perspective, we don't have to go to 0 to 10, right? Like you could have a blank box that like Lucy's talking about, and I'll be fine, and I'll be behind you guys. But I think we just have to sort of start putting those breadcrumbs out there so we can sort of walk, and then run towards this. And I'll tell you, one of the things that, and then I'll let Commissioner Parr go, is one of the things as a policy leader that sort of is a little bit of an abrasion point for me is when we sit at boards and we don't really have, and that we're sort of solicited as community leaders, volunteers, policy leaders, and that stuff is not cleanly sort of pulled into the whole process, right? So the little bit of frustration I have with this is just getting that conversation that you've heard constantly sort of fed into this whole process to help us get there. So, all right, I'll get off my soapbox about it. I appreciate you listening to Kate, though.
Thanks, Mayor Van Gordon. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Listening to what both mayors have stated, I could not agree more with the concepts they're talking about. Having a 1-year strategic plan is not something that any one of us would prefer. We'd rather have a longer reaching plan than that. But a 1-year plan is right at this moment in time. And I believe a part of that plan is being ready for this 3-year strategic plan, which we'll put in place and implement starting about a year from now. We've been talking about this for quite some time. One thing that really is important to understand is as you look at the points in this plan, most of the points that are covered are already underway by some other agency. So the committee that has actually identified them isn't necessarily going to do anything about it other than monitor that it is happening. And I'll go directly to, let's see, I'll go to 6.1, 6, which is the Coordinated Entry Stakeholder Committee, create and adopt an updated housing assessment tool that more accurately assesses vulnerability of those accessing coordinated entry. And it goes down with different points. These are all actually within an ongoing plan of Lane County. So, we're moving forward in that direction, whether or not the stakeholder committee actually does anything about it. And that is the same as we go down the list in just about every area. It is being worked on by another agency, whether it's the city of Eugene or whether it's the city of Springfield or Lane County. So I'm confident this plan will have not only some teeth, but also some results as the year progresses. One thing that I've tried to make clear is that we've not done a very good job of telling people what we are doing. Lane County certainly hasn't, and shame on me for that. And I've used that term before. So, one thing that we can do is let people know the progress that we are making across the spectrum of addressing the housing, homelessness, and poverty needs. So I think, Mayor Vinnis, I'll talk to you on this. You asked, is this action or advisory? Well, really, it's both. We're a statutory committee, of course we are, and that is an action committee. But under the current governance, we are, of course, advisory to the Board of County Commissioners. Now, we should be and have been far more than just advisory because of the nature of the people who sit on this board. The county commissioners should and does take heed and listen to what this board is recommending. And sometimes it's not directly in response to this board, but the work is being done. And so Mayor Van Gordon and Mayor Vinnis, I think that as we move down the road and as we look at the governance model, how does this committee provide actual action items that we will monitor what the different jurisdictions are doing in a way that we can feel that we had direct impact on what is happening. So I kind of wrapped around that a little bit, but I believe that a 1-year plan is right for now. I like it the way it's written. It is relatively vague. There's no assignment to which jurisdiction is working on it. And I think that could be a part of what we do is let's say which jurisdiction and which agency is working on the different points of this plan. And then as we go through this year, the executive committee monitors the progress on this 1-year strategic plan and gets ready for the 3-year and also the discussion surrounding governance. a lot more to say, but please let other people talk for a bit.
Thanks, Commissioner Farr. So I put myself in the queue to see if I could maybe wrap some of these suggestions together and put a recommendation out there. So, Kate, I wonder if we can add, I'll make sure I have the right number. So we go to 7. If we can add like a number 8 section that's the goal is sort of clarifying governance and kind of future planning for the PHB, whatever we decide the wording of that goal. Then the action items that I documented here, and maybe others would have, establish a process and expectations for developing the 3-year overarching plan, add metrics and accountability tracking to the 1-year plan that we currently have. One thing that I noticed that I don't know if this feels right to put on this or not, but kind of what Commissioner Farr was just mentioning is that there's some of these items in here that I fear we put something on here that maybe another committee, even that's within the county somewhere else, is doing, right? Like the healthcare committee, number 7, I think Mayor Van Gordon pointed out, add 2 outreach staff who are able to follow up with people in the community after discharge. I know that the county convenes a housing is healthcare committee that is doing a lot of these types of activities, and it seems inefficient for our committee to have a strategic plan that pulls out some items that are very closely related to what this other committee that is also being convened by the county is doing, without seeing where do those cross over and what are they trying to get done in the next year, and how do we make sure we have the same goals, and if not, if we want to get twice as much done with 2 different committees, that they're at least coordinated a little bit. So the action item I put was identify overlapping committee and work groups across the community to streamline for this broader plan. And then I think that maybe another governance piece is to review and clearly define the role of the PHB, because I still think that there's question in some people's minds about what is the role, what's the authority, and if we can just really get that locked in for the committee and then also the broader community, I think we can more effectively execute on a 3-year plan if we know exactly what the role of this body is. So that would be my recommendation, is to kind of add another section where we can like really dig into some of those governance pieces that have been brought up in the last couple months.
And I'll just share, Brittany, yes, we can absolutely do that. And I will add the points that you shared, both the goal and the action steps.
Okay, and I'm happy to help wordsmith that. That was me jotting it down, and if you can't tell, I'm super sick, so my brain's a little foggy, so my wordsmithing is not very eloquent today. But I'm happy to help, and then if we need to send it out to people in advance, if there's a way for it not to hold up the whole process, so maybe we can vote to add that in with like rough language, so then we could still vote at the next PHB meeting. I know that that's important to everyone, and we want to get this established, so if we can streamline it and make it happen fast, I would be willing to do that. Mayor Venice.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to support what you just said, and also appreciate Pat's comments. I think that this document is fleshed out in the ways that we've discussed now. Some other sections in it. Is a very good place for us to just land, but I think also in responding to what Mayor Van Gordon said, that I think that this is a model to tell us what we can and can't do, what we do and don't do, because we can just leave all these items on here, and as we set up action plans and metrics, we're going to say, oh, actually, we're not equipped to do that, or somebody else is doing that. And if we think about this document that way, it will help us build a more realistic 3-year plan and the next step. So I don't think this has to be perfect. It just has to be a landing place, because what it seems to me, and I know it's our next item of business, is to talk about continuum of care applications. Really, in my mind, this body is advisory to the Board of Commissioners on how money should be spent, where the money should come from, and how it should be spent. And so a lot of these practical applications about how the HMIS system works or something else is not really the job of this body, unless there is a suggestion from staff and this body considers it to take it to the commissioners that we should be going after grant funding to make some improvement to HMIS. And this group of stakeholders agrees that that should be our continuum of care priority. So I just feel that that there's so many things on this that make it very clear that we're way beyond our mission as the continuum of care agency. And if we keep that as our filter as we go through this, what is our mission as a continuum of care agency? We will begin to filter out the things in which we're duplicating what other committees are doing, or, stretching beyond. And then we'll recognize, is there a need for another process? But so that's let's not fine tune this too much. Do it, add the things that Brittany's just suggested, be able to vote on it, and then use it as our own metric for how are we doing? What are we really doing?
That's great. Any other comments or questions on this piece? Kate, I'm typing up the rambling that I just did, and I'll put it in the chat for consideration. Do we want to take a vote on this right now? Do we want to put it to the end of the meeting and then circle back once some language is in front of people? I'm open to how folks want to move forward with that. Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
Co-Vice Chair Quick Warner, I would like to say that I think we're ready to move forward with the vote on this, understanding that Kate's been writing down notes, you have and I have, that the strategic, the one-year plan as it is, let's forward it to the main body with our approval, with our thumbs up, so to speak, and then understanding that we're adding item 8 as you described it. There will be the ongoing monitoring throughout this year, and potentially looking at the governance plan. And I think we're ready to move on this, and I'm ready to make a motion to move this, the strategic plan as written, with amendments that are being typed up by Kate Budd and input provided by Co-Vice Chair Quick Warner to the full body of the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Excellent.
And that was a motion, if it didn't sound like it.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Thoughts or comments from other folks? Okay, all those in favor of moving forward the strategic plan with the recommended additions that were discussed? Can I get an eye or a hand or
Aye.
wave frantically at me? Any opposed? Okay, that sounds good. I want to make sure that the folks who are on the executive committee that are to be voting are making sure that they have a chance to do it. I'm only seeing a few folks with their cameras on, so anybody else, just make sure to use the raise hand function so we can capture that. Okay, excellent. So, all right, Kate, does that get you what we need for that strategic plan portion?
It does, yes, and I think both your words and my words are very similar, if not the same.
Okay, great.
So
well,
thank you.
Use yours, and then we can get that piece added for the full PHB. Okay, next up, we're going to discuss an opportunity. There's a notice of funding for from HUD for an unsheltered homeless. Some unsheltered homeless work, and Kate was going to talk a little bit about what that NOFO is and then discuss whether it's an opportunity that we feel ready to take advantage of.
Yeah, way to use the lingo. So NOFO is a notice of funding opportunity through HUD. And as mentioned, we are, the continuum of care for Lane County. And the overarching goal of any continuum of care is to reduce the number of people who are homeless in our community. And we know that the only way to reduce the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, based on all the HUD definitions, is providing them with permanent housing. And HUD was able to identify additional dollars for continuums of care, which are above and beyond the usual continuum of care applications that you've worked with Amanda on year after year, last year being the only exception recently. And under this guise of reducing the number of people who are experiencing homelessness, there are two focus areas of this NOFO. The first is helping rural communities reduce homelessness. Like always, HUD put very specific definitions on what a rural community is. And because we have a metropolitan statistical area in our county, Eugene and Springfield, of course, we don't qualify for those rural dollars. We can have a robust conversation about how that doesn't make sense, but that's the way it is, according to HUD. So the other component of the NOFO is unsheltered homelessness. And our community can apply for the unsheltered homelessness dollars, which equates to a little bit more than $1 million that spans over a 3-year period. And so it's about $350,000 each year for 3 years. Not an enormous amount of money and nothing to sneeze at, because we know that can create additional programs that are much needed in our community. There is a summary of the unsheltered homelessness NOFO in your packet, and a few key things that I'll mention is that if we were to apply for this NOFO, we would need to create a plan focused on unsheltered homelessness. And the plan would need to be housing first per the NOFO, which just basically means that we would want to focus on how we move people out of homelessness into permanent housing. The dollars that we could apply for, while they are not able to be used for emergency shelter or alternative shelter, there's nothing in the plan that says we can't identify, need to sustain or increase alternative or emergency shelter. We just can't pay for it with continuum of care NOFO dollars. When Amanda and I started talking about this opportunity, a few things about this required plan came to our mind. One being that it would need to be developed under a very short timeline. The application itself is due October 20th. And so we would need to create a plan around unsheltered homelessness basically in the next 6 to 8 weeks. It doesn't have to be hugely comprehensive. It could be something that we continue to build on. And we would only look for whatever we develop around unsheltered homelessness planning to be just 1 year, so that we have an opportunity to build upon it. We're not able to submit this application if we don't do the unsheltered plan, but certainly there's pros and cons to doing that. The other thing that we do want to keep in mind as we're thinking about whether to move this particular grant forward is just that it's going to be time. It's going to take time for the people who are involved, both with the executive committee and with the greater PHB, above and beyond these meetings, because there'll be opportunities to bring people together in focus groups, to fill out, a survey, for example, to inform the unsheltered homelessness plan, and other planning time that will be needed to be added to these meetings that occur already. And so, as a committee, do we feel like that time exists to be able to focus on this project? So I want to pause there and see if folks have any questions just about the NOFO or generally with the unsheltered plan at this point.
Okay, I see Dan and then Mayor Venice so far, and then
hopefully my internet cooperates. I keep getting frozen out here. But one question and suggestion would be, if we can't use this for the alternative camps per se, I'm thinking one thing that would really help would be if all of these alternative programs had access to a particular pot of funds that were only for that purpose of moving them out of the camp into housing. So some additional funds that we could then have a quicker path to get people out of these camps and into permanent housing, and don't have to go through, wait for Section 8 and everything else. I think could be a huge benefit, and ultimately enable us to serve more people, because we'd have a shorter turnaround of folk that we have in the camps.
Which that's certainly something that could go into the plan, a key gap that ought to be planned around.
Mayor Venice.
Yeah, so I actually love Dan's idea. It's kind of weird that this is funding for an unsheltered homeless plan, but it cannot include any emergency or transitional shelter for the homeless. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, right? This is another HUD doing two things. But that said, I just want to plant this seed. It's not a direct response to this. We just had a conversation about the purpose of this advisory board, and it feels to me that creating an unsheltered homeless plan could be a purpose for this board that actually would be very advisory to and the fact that at this late in the game that we're sort of saying what would be our unsheltered homeless plan look like is, this points to the fact that there's a gap in the work that we're doing that this points us to. But I also have a quick question for you, Kate, about the county is currently working on a homeless or housing action plan. Is that right?
Yes.
And
and it's definitely targeted around affordable housing.
And so is that, given Dan's suggestion about the kind of move along prospects for this funding, could that relate to the housing action plan?
No, based on my understanding is it's more upstream.
Okay.
And so what he suggested would make more sense to me in an unsheltered plan, identifying that gap and then identifying an action step to help address that.
I'm actually what I was actually getting at is there's a continuity. It's a continuum. It is the continuum of care. Like the person who's unsheltered, who gets into an emergency shelter, who gets funding to help them get into more stable shelter, that's the continuum of care. So just wanting to make sure that as we talk about whatever we do with this unsheltered homeless plan, it's connected to that housing action plan.
Excellent. I see Mayor Van Gordon.
I win for being the guy that's on mute for part of the meeting. So Kate, if this takes 4 to 6 weeks to put together this plan, I've got a couple of, concerns here. What's the thing the staff would stop doing to make time to put together this unsheltered plan?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And what likely would need to happen is that the committees may need to be on pause for a month or two while staff were focusing on this plan. Or that the committees would work on like a key piece of the plan as opposed to just having a more generalized meeting as they are now.
So basically the 1-year strategic plan we just sort of talked about may get all redone, right? If we want to do this?
I think they would be complementary to one another.
Okay.
Especially with knowing that the NOFO decisions likely wouldn't really be falling into place until the next fiscal year, knowing HUD's timelines.
I don't know. My sense here is, given the timeline that you describe and for the amount of money, right, and given the fact that we need to get some of these plans done anyway, is to sort of like slow walk it and maybe pass on this one and set the, like, because if we rush, create a plan in 4 to 8 weeks, right, the quality of that and the ability to respond to public input to that is probably fairly sort of limited, for the fact that in the grand scheme of things, this may not be game changing money. I think a plan's probably a good idea, but I think kind of taking it slow, making sure we have all the parts there, and sort of thinking about it in a way that kind of gets us to the finish line makes sense to me. My concern would be that if we try to do everything here, we're not going to do anything very well. And that, especially one of the things I feel like we've lost in this conversation sometimes is the sort of coalition in the community around solving this as sort of an issue, because there's people that are frustrated, there's people that have gone different ways, and having a good, getting a little bit more organized is going to help us bring people back on board about which direction that we should row. So I don't feel like we should sort of rush at the NOFA, and try to get and sort of turn in half our work, right? When really, if I think about this at 90,000 feet, we need to sort of reorientate ourselves around, where the end zone is, and start marching that way, and see if we can bring some of these other funding opportunities along with us.
Thanks, Mayor Van Gordon. Soraya, did I maybe see your hand, but you took it down? I just want to make sure it wasn't on a mistake. Move on to Commissioner Farr, and then Soraya, if you want to jump back in.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll mention that Vice Chair Krieger just put in the chat that on August 2nd, the Board of County Commissioners will be receiving an update on the affordable housing plan. So stay tuned for that. Work is in place. And Kate, this to you. This is a tiny amount of money, and any plan that we build is a tiny plan, really, in the grandest scheme of things. I'm viewing this as an opportunity to have more or less an ad hoc plan that really wraps into work that is already being done, and maybe fortifies work that is already being done. For instance, your recommendation regarding provide additional health-focused outreach. We have health-focused outreach currently, and this would allow us to just fortify that plan. Am I correct in that recommendation? And then the same thing with the providing additional housing navigation services. It's not a new plan per se. It wraps into a plan that's already in place, or a work plan that's already in place. And this is more or less a sidebar ad hoc plan, just to satisfy HUD's whim to have a plan. And it's not a be-all, do-all, end-all plan for us, but it just meshes closely in with what staff really is already doing. Correct me on that one, Kate, or let me know that I'm close to correct.
It would certainly include what is already being done, and we would the very draft thinking around the process is to conduct a wider community survey around what the community feels like ought to be done around unsheltered homelessness, to engage with some focus group conversations, and then provide a summary of those feedback opportunities and fold it into an unsheltered homelessness plan. And it's only going to be an 8-week process. And so it certainly won't be as robust as what I think a traditional plan process might look like. And so it certainly won't engage as many community members as one might.
That is close to at least what I was trying to say, Kate. But so I think you've wrapped it up there. And I think Brittany, you have done a tremendous amount of work trying to engage the business community by helping provide data and to wrap up all of the things that we are doing. And I think that this is what Kate is just describing is something that can kind of be an adjunct to what you're already doing with the business community, providing more information that allows people to understand what it is that we are doing. Once again, $350,000 times 3 is, we blink that much money. It's just not very much in terms of, you can't even buy the paper to write a plan on. the way HUD requires plans to be. So I think, Kate, you've kind of explained it the way I tried to explain it. Thanks.
So I put myself in the queue. I have so many conflicting thoughts running through my head on this specific item, and I shared some of them earlier this week with the chairs. So the first thought running through my head is like, there's money and our community needs money and we have a homeless problem, and so like we should figure out how to take advantage of this, right? Like I want to make sure that that is a thought I'm having. The other thought that I'm having, and this is like just trying to channel and representing sort of the role that I'm in this board, which is representing the business community, but I would also sort of say the broader community perspective that's outside of government. And that is that at the highest level, like there is a sense of hopelessness in our community that we are not getting our hands around this problem, and that it's growing, and what I keep hearing from folks is that what's the plan? Like, what is the government's and nonprofits and our community's plan for dealing with this? And I've been banging that drum for a year, right? Like that's not new information that I've been asking that. My concern is that if we shorten this process down to 6 to 8 weeks and we do engage the public at any level, I feel like there's this sense of confusion out there right now that this is going to just add to that. And so that's where I have this like push and pull in my head, is like, if we were to actually just put together a super kind of like pulling all the pieces together, put a one-page plan that fits HUD's recommendations so we can get this money, like in my head, I'm like, okay, that feels fine. That's less confusing to the public. We're just kind of pulling things together. But if we do this weird quasi thing where we're actually engaging the public and asking their opinions without like that really broad sort of like engagement and perspective, and like, you know, giving people the context they need and knowing where this is going to fit and giving the confidence that this is the plan, my fear is that we're going to continue to confuse people. We have the city's housing plan, we have the county's housing plan, we have the CSI funds, which have a unsheltered housing component. We have the Poverty and Homelessness Board 1 year now strategic plan, talks of doing a 3-year, and is this the same as that or is this different? We have if you get what I'm saying, it's just to the general public, it is so confusing, and people just feel like they can't wrap their heads around it. And so this is why I'm internally struggling, because I feel like it's money, there's an opportunity for us to go after it. I don't want to be like a holdup for that, but I'm concerned that if we engage in any kind of public process, that it's going to people are going to be like, oh, so is this the plan now? What does this do to the TAC? What does this do to the PHB plan? And we just have to be able to explain that to people. And I think that we have to be really thoughtful that has to be a piece of it, or we're going to continue down this path of just like really like complicating this in people's heads. So that's my soapbox, and I'll get off of it. But it's where I'm at. I don't know how I'm going to vote on this because I'm still very torn about it. Chris?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and I apologize to the PHB for my tardiness. Was dealing with an unexpected COVID outbreak issue. I am supporting the NOFO concept moving forward as the staff have recommended. I have concerns about longevity of everything that we work on, and so these concerns that have been expressed by folks in the room are certainly valid. That said, a lot of what is named in this plan to fund is currently being done unfunded, underfunded, or waiting for funding to launch. And so this could be the seed for the next steps moving forward. We have new leadership in our departments. We have new plans and scales that we are trying to address. And I feel like this will be a modular component, a piece of the bigger puzzle. No, this is not the plan to end all plans. And as one of the people who wanted to do the 5-year plan, not the 1-year plan, I understand the validity of trying to just have one thing to try and get everybody to coalesce around. But sometimes it's not so simple as we would like it, especially with the federal funding. And I think to pass is to acknowledge that we don't need, and I think that would be a hard pill to swallow for those underserved providers who are out there doing this work without access to monies, but knowing that in order for their next steps, in order for these next projects to succeed, that they have to do the work. The medical support that this would be bridging to is the work that the respite community, the Board of County Commissioners have said is a need. HSD has said is a need, and the work is being done in the community. So having people segue into that through what these dollars would do would help make current projects successful. Having some of the folks move into the commons and the Nell and whatnot through housing navigation, through the safe sleep sites that we are partnering in this community with Eugene to support the people who are coming out of the Life Changes program. All of these things are tied into current works. We need to be able to take it to that next phase, to that next stage, and this is vital. There is a lot of work, and there's a lot of stuff in our greater county that is underfunded and undersupported because the need is focused through the media's lens and through other people's lenses on what are we doing in Eugene. So these dollars will help us keep our county vibrant and meet those other goals, in my opinion. I'm sharing why we as a leadership committee move this forward to the PHB to consider, and I'm open to hearing any pushback or change. I yield. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thanks, Chris. I see Mayor Venice, and then Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. So I very much support what Chris has just said. I want to make a couple of quick points. The first is the Biden administration has rolled out more money through HUD this year than we have seen in a long time, and they want us to spend that money. And the only way we'll get more money in the future is if we take advantage of the opportunities HUD has. So there is money on the table, and to walk away from that money is not going to help us in the future. So it may not be perfect, but I would strongly, it is not good to walk away from these funds. We know we need them, and we know we can find we know we have a use for them. The second thing is, following up on both Brittany and Chris's comments, we have a TAC program, a TAC approval plan approved by the Board of Commissioners and the City Council. It is still the document of record of which is our unsheltered homeless plan.
Yeah.
It exists already. I don't see any reason why the county has to create a new plan. It has already been through both public agencies. It is documented, it has been approved, and there are metrics to demonstrate what it has done. So why don't we just use that document now in order to get these funds? And it supports what the use is. There are move along dollars in there. There's support for outreach services. All of the things that you want to fund in this document are included as TAC recommendations, already approved policy. So I feel like you can just take a shortcut, present the TAC thing to agencies, implemented this, they're working on it, they're spending money, here's more money, let's plug it in there and take advantage of HUD dollars.
Thanks, Mayor Venice. Kate, I know you were maybe going to want to pop in with some feedback from some of those comments.
Just thank you, Mayor. I think that's an excellent point, and would absolutely pilfer from that plan in a number of different ways. The other thing I'd like to clarify is that this committee's vote would be staff's clearance to move forward. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to bring it to the PHB if you figure it's another 4 weeks forward, and need to get clear next steps at this meeting.
Thanks, Kate. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Chris and Mayor Venice and Kate have all helped me make a motion, form a motion. And I see your hands raised, Mayor Van Gordon. Hopefully you can speak to the motion for or against it. But my motion would be to advise staff to move forward with application for the NOFO, following HUD's guidance and requirements, and wrap all of the elements of the NOFO, the request, wrap all of the elements into existing programs, such as that are existent in the TAC or within currently programs that are currently moving forward by the. See, clearly I'm not all that ready for the motion, but what I'm trying to say is advise staff to move forward with replying to the NOFO based upon the input that you've just received, that it wraps into existing programs, and that we avoid any tremendous outreach publicly to cause confusion, that would cause confusion as to what it is that we're trying to do. Now, Kate, can you say what I just said?
what I heard is to move forward with the Unsheltered Homelessness Plan, make sure that we're wrapping into existing documents, including the TAC plan, as well as our strategic plan that we just adopted for the year, and to not do major outreach. So I'm hearing to not do kind of what I shared as far as the survey or the focus groups, but I will work to engage the PHB to make sure that they have an opportunity to provide feedback.
That's exactly what I said. With inherent in that it is that you do it on HUD's timeline. That you get the instructions to move forward on HUD's timeline, which is very short. Thank you. That is my motion. Waiting for a second.
Does anyone have a second?
I'll second.
Sorry.
Chris?
I yield to whoever went first.
Okay, so I will keep it back up open for discussion. So if we can, I guess, keep discussion points, I think it'll all be relevant. But Mayor Van Gordon.
Yeah, I guess I think, like, I don't think saying no to money is saying we don't need money. I think saying no to money is saying that we've got to get a little bit more organized. And what's been clear over the last year is that we're still at this spot where we've got some sort of structural issues to sort of address and get a little bit more organized about it before we're ready to take in more money, because there's been a lot of cash and a lot of investments from the Biden administration, and I'm grateful for it. But the ability to execute and be a good steward for the public is really important here. And I think when I think about it, I always feel like these things are us, instead of running at the goal, are running at the next sort of shiny thing that gets thrown our way. And what I don't want to lose is to start actually working on this sort of structural things that we've been kicking around for the last year that are really going to help set the foundation for that next level. I'm not gonna sort of die on this hill, right, to keep this from going forward if people think we need the money. But I want to sort of keep echoing the idea that we're still not sort of responding to the problems that we all know that we need to sort of solve to make the board function correctly, you know, so we can actually sort of move forward with some of these challenges. Because I think Brittany called it right. Like, I think people really do feel hopeless out there. And, you know, us getting more organized and not sort of continuing to just sort of grow the series of committees and services and everything, you know, keep adding everything in the kitchen sink to it would mean a lot to make sure that we're going the right direction.
I gotta get on a meeting.
You go ahead and do your own, I'll get mine.
Are you sure? Okay, I'm gonna leave it out.
Thanks, Mayor Van Gordon. I would kind of go along the same lines, but so Sarai, your comment kind of confuses me a little bit. So Mayor Venice is correct. Some framing on the TAC recommendations include a section on housing. The piece that confuses me, this vote doesn't negate that work, but could help significantly focus the work on permanent housing, which is a solution to homelessness. So I guess one of my concerns, and I guess I'll let you, Sarai, elaborate on what you mean there in a second here. One of my concerns with going out to like kind of a bigger public, asking everybody to put together this plan, is that it does open up this like, what else should we be doing? And instead of focusing on what we already have identified. And so I think that my concern with doing that is the confusion of, oh, we have more money coming in, what else can we be doing? As opposed to, we have the components of a plan just spread amongst 20 different plans across our community. And we just need someone to pick and choose each of those things that make the most sense for this specific bucket of funding. But then I'm also even hearing like in this meeting, like all the things that Chris mentioned that we need money for are not the housing, permanent housing, which you just said, Sarai. So that's where I'm like, I'm afraid we're not even on the same page about if we're to go after unhoused funding and we only have $300,000 to spend after we spend the money to do the planning. That's not a lot of money to do all the things that just got listed. So I would just want to make sure that we're being really realistic with, let's put together a plan, but the plan is being applied to only get us $300,000. So we either need to be like conscious that this quote unquote plan we're putting together is also going to be an unfunded plan, or it's going to be very specifically, and this is, Kate, where I feel like I got confused in the meeting on Wednesday, is this plan very specifically targeted at how we would spend $300,000 a year? Or does it need to be a broader plan for how we're solving unhoused homelessness in our community? And then here's the tiny piece that we would spend that $300,000 on. Because that difference, to me, it matters, because then I'm just worried we have another plan that's out there that people are going to look to as our plan, and we don't actually have a lot of work behind it to say how we're going to fund all those things.
So it is the latter, that it would not only include how the $350,000 would be used, but then a broader, what else is needed. Certainly, if we were pulling from other plans, then there would be other progress that is moving those action items forward, as opposed to doing a big, broad engagement where then many ideas that may not have any type of funding connected to them may arise.
Yeah.
If I might, just to clarify the part that you were talking about, Brittany, I wasn't necessarily speaking to whether we should do a broad plan for this specific grant, more saying that, yes, it's true that we do have TAC recommendations. We have some level of planning for when those projects could occur, but I do think it's possible to pull together information from many existing plans to seed this work, and then kind of moving it forward. I think the ongoing funding stream piece of this is really valuable, because even though it's $300,000 a year, it is continuously. And that also does give opportunity. HUD frequently puts out NOFOs that are for COC grantees, sometimes for specific kind of segments of that. So the more we can build that ongoing funding for the COC, the better off we'll be in the long run.
So this funding would be specifically for the COC, not funds that can be granted out to other organizations. Is that what I am hearing, Kate?
So it can be granted out to other organizations. The county would do a request for proposal, just like we would with other dollars that would be targeted to the plan.
Okay.
And the eligible program types that HUD's identified.
Okay, thanks. I see Chris and then Amanda, and then I'm trying to watch the time, but I was afraid this was going to happen.
Thanks. I just also want to say that this could be, we have the TAC report, but there's other parts of our community that did not participate in the TAC report. So we do have other things to be conscious of. And so the housing navigation, the medical stuff or the case management support, those things that were listed do help feed those other existent or burgeoning programs. We do have other examples in our community where a body allocated federal dollars, such as the community development block grants, are allocated to Lane County to help do case management across the county, to help serve outreach needs across the county, even though they originated to another jurisdiction or from another plan. So there are ways that communities spend their dollars and governments spend their dollars to help support or match these things, or otherwise help support this. So please look at it as a modular, not replace all. This is not a Band-Aid to fix everything. This is we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to wrap this up together to get to the next 3 years as we build out those other deeper plans, those other more flourishing and fleshed out policies. Thank you for all the conversation on this. I yield to Amanda.
Amanda.
Thanks, Miss. So I just wanted to add a couple of comments to the discussion, just for some additional context. I think what we didn't note is that this will happen sort of concurrently with our regular continuum of care notice of funding process. HUD has noted that that will come out very soon. So these two will be running sort of at the same time, and we'll be handling them simultaneously. So that's another thing to consider. And then the other thing is that it is going to be highly competitive. There's only about, I think, a little over 300 million available nationwide for this opportunity, and communities will be funded based on their scores that they receive in their application. And some communities, the larger cities, are able to apply for up to 60 million of that 300. So it is anticipated to be highly competitive. Up to 10 COCs in each state are eligible to receive funding. So I just want to put that out there to understand kind of, we may not get the funding. We could go through this whole process and it is not necessarily guaranteed just because we apply for it, that once they run out of funding, no other communities will be funded once they hit that maximum amount of funding available. So I just wanted to add that. And then another point to the discussion around developing the plan around unsheltered homelessness, I think it is certainly a really, great opportunity and something that obviously we've been talking about for a moment. And I think we do have plans that incorporate some of these pieces that are required. There are specific requirements we'll have to meet for that plan, and the TAC report and other things do not encompass all of those items. I think particularly there's pieces around equity that are not addressed in that plan. There are not pieces around how we engage folks with lived experience in our decision-making process. That is a big part of the requirements of this plan. And HUD has really emphasized, and they sent out an additional email emphasizing that they really want this to be a community approach with a broad base of stakeholders involved in developing the plan. So I just want to be clear about the expectations around that, and that staff can certainly help facilitate that process, but it will really take an effort of this board, the PHB, and a broad group of stakeholders to develop that plan over the next 2 months.
Okay, so that's interesting if it's required that we do the broad community outreach, because that would kind of negate that portion of the motion that we not do that.
Well, I will say that the PHB itself is a diverse group of representatives from the community. And then, for lived experience, we would definitely go to League. And so I think it is possible to continue with the lower profile and meet HUD's expectations on that front. But to Amanda's point, there would be other pieces that we would need to bring in. We couldn't just rely solely on the TAC report, for example.
Got it. Commissioner Farr.
Very quickly, let's vote. We do need the money. We can use the money effectively without initiating new programs. We just need to frame it in a way that meets HUD requirements. Staff has the ability and the resources to do exactly that. So let's vote on it.
I'll take that as
I'm with you, Pat. Let's just vote on it. I think this is moved forward. I'm hearing Amanda stress about she's got 2 concurrent planning processes, but this was moved to us for a vote. So,
yeah,
I'm assuming that staff and your decided that there was enough resources to do this if we approved it. So,
okay. So, the question's called. Those in favor of pushing forward this NOFO, say aye.
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 All right. No opposed. Matthias, I think you're still there. All right, no opposed. Looks like that passes. So, Kate,
sorry, I meant to say aye, but my
you're okay. Thanks. So with that in mind, there's definitely going to have to be a couple portions cut out of the agenda. It took a little bit longer than we thought. So, Kate or Chris, I don't know what your recommendation is for what thing we move to next year.
Amanda, do you just want to touch on your piece and I can fly through mine, or hold till next time?
I think it is related to this topic of the NOFO planning process. We had previously a RFP eval HMIS committee that did a lot of the work around the continuum of care application, including the evaluation process, reviewing appeals, completing the ranking and determining new projects, as well as approving a variety of things that are required under the continuum of care NOFO. And so as we have this additional NOFO that we're going to be applying for, in addition to our regular COC application process, we do need a committee to sort of handle some of those process items, because we can't sort of do all of that work within the PHB broader committee or the larger group. And so what we have done for the last several sort of items that we've had to do, we've formed this sort of ad hoc committee between the PHB executive committee and league members and a couple of members who were previously members of that RFP evaluation committee who did not have a conflict of interest. And so we've sort of wanted to just update the group on that, and that we would anticipate continuing that ad hoc committee as sort of a COC application ad hoc committee to handle those variety of tasks that are required to come to the COC for approval or consideration based on the collaborative applicant's recommendations. And so that time commitment would continue throughout I would anticipate the rest of the year, and with significant activities from now until October when these applications are due. So I just wanted to put that out there, and if there are questions or concerns about that structure, please let me know, but I know we're really short on time. So that's very abbreviated version.
Chris, I still see your hand up there.
Sorry, that was Leighton. Don't have a hand up.
Okay. All right.
Kate?
Thanks, Amanda. And I'm going to share my time with Eileen, who wanted to make sure that she got time during Elaine Walters, that she had time during public comment. So Elaine, please share.
Thank you all. Thank you for letting me crash your meeting and for all the good work you're doing. I am Elaine Walters. I know many of you from the Trauma Healing Project, and we were one of the funded organizations under the Oregon Health Authority looking at behavioral health equity, particularly around residential programs and housing options for folks that are unsheltered. And what we proposed and have been in the process of doing is to conduct a survey of the workforce. A lot of folks were talking to the clients and participants in programming. We've actually been doing a survey, and I think many of you have gotten my announcement once or twice about that survey, but I wanted to let you know that we've gotten about 145 responses, mostly Lane County, mostly Eugene Springfield, but beyond that as well. And we're looking at the conditions within which this workforce is providing direct services and their own mental and physical health status as a way to sort of feed to the state and potentially local partners what the needs are for maintaining and supporting that workforce so that they can keep doing this work. Somewhere around 60% of the folks that have answered our survey have only been in this work for 3 years or less, but we're asking questions about their stress levels at work and outside of work, their needs and recommendations, whether or not they're going to stick with the work or not, how they're paid or not. And the data coming back so far is fabulous, but we're keeping the survey open, this phase of it, till the 31st of July. So I'm going to put the link in your chat. And I've got an intro email that I'd be happy to send to somebody here to send out if you don't already have it. But we'd like to have anybody providing direct services to folks that are unhoused or in serious mental health or other crisis, the workers, volunteer and paid, to participate in the survey. That's one ask. And the second ask is to come back to you folks in September with the preliminary analysis of that work. Because I think you folks are leading a lot of the efforts around the care and support our community is getting, but also maybe are in really good positions to make recommendations locally for what this workforce could benefit having. So that's my announcement. I did put the link in there, and who could I send that sort of to, that, or do you already have it so that this whole group could have it? I think most of you may have seen it.
You're welcome to send it to me, and Diana and I can make sure it gets out to the group.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but thanks again for letting me be here.
Our pleasure. And just one more point, there is a capacity building technology grant that is open through the 29th for nonprofits. This could include, getting tablets for your staff, or a new grant management system, or some other type of technology that might help support nonprofits. So please check that one out. And then there's a second capacity building grant that just opened 2 days ago that focuses on providing training, technical assistance, additional capacity for, human resources, or for finance for nonprofits. So please check that one out too. We know the need is there, and so we hope that we're able to meet some of the needs through those dollars. That's everything I have.
Excellent. Chris?
Yes, ma'am. I want to thank everybody for attending this July PHB meeting. One thing of the executive committee, one thing I'd like to have y'all look in your emails for over the next couple of days is a request for input about the PHB and the healthcare committee putting forward a presentation to legislative days to be able to share what we're doing in the county regarding respite work and recuperation work and addressing the medical needs of our unhoused as we bridge forward and wait for housing to meet the needs of our people. So I just wanted to ask any voting members to please look at your emails for the next couple of days to be able to see that, and we will start this conversation. But thank you very much, Brittany, for overseeing the meeting in my stead.
Absolutely. My time management was poor today, but it was good discussion, everyone. I appreciate it. All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Your time.